What's up guys, welcome back to another MOTOBOB video. Recently I had to get rid of my ER6, my Kawasaki ER6N relatively quickly because I already had a deposit down on this Triumph. So, well actually mainly I just wanted to sell it quickly because I wanted to go and get my new bike. I'm sure many other people have been in that situation. Anyway, it only took me a couple of days to sell it, so I thought I'd make a quick video about how I did it and maybe give you guys some tips. I'm sure everyone's got their own tips for selling a bike, but these are mine. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is Part Xing and using a service like We Buy Any Bike. And I think when you want to get rid of your bike quickly and they give you a quote online, or the dealer gives you a quote there and then for part exchange, it's super tempting because it feels like no strings, no hassle, just get rid of the bike. But I'd probably advise against it. I mean, my ER6N, the dealer offered me about $1,000 less part exchange than what I got for it in the end, selling it privately, and it wasn't that much hassle to sell it. Bear in mind that $1,000 is like about, well, over half the value of the bike. So even though it's hassle free, I suppose, you know, £1,000, imagine all the stuff you do for $1,000. Listing a bike and then showing it to someone and then taking some money off them is not the hardest. And I'm not saying that the dealer was, you know, unjust in what they offered me for it, because it didn't have service history. I'd put a few mods on it, and I think it's probably easier for them to sell something that's stock. You know, it wasn't in perfect nick, and it's quite an old bike now. It was low mileage, it had only done just under 11,000 miles, but still, I get where they're coming from. I think it's fair. They've got to check it, get it all sorted out, ready to sell. So yeah, I'm fine with that, but I just think, especially for a bike around that value, like maybe something that's worth $5 or $6 grand, it might, that kind of that difference in price might be a smaller percentage of what it's worth, and so it might be worthwhile. But certainly for a cheaper bike like that, an older bike, I just wouldn't recommend it. And as for the kind of like We Buy Any Bike type things, I think they offered me like 600 quid for it. 600 quid, absolutely mad. So obviously I didn't bother with that. I mean, they do just come and pick it up the next day, I think, or something like that. So obviously if you stick your bike into one of those websites, which only takes a few minutes, and it gives you a ridiculously good offer and you can take it, then I suppose maybe you should go for it. Same goes for the dealer. I mean, you may as well, if you're buying from a dealer, you may as well get a quote for Part X just to see what they'll offer you. But honestly, realistically, I just think you're going to get so much more selling it privately. So that's tip number one. Number two, where should you sell it? If you've got a specialist exotic bike that's worth quite a lot of money, then perhaps it is worthwhile using something like MCN or Auto Trader Bikes, that kind of thing, because you're probably going to take a little bit longer to sell it, and you're probably looking for a bit more of a niche buyer who has the money and is interested in the particular bike you're buying. But for a run-of-the-mill, you know, general motorbike that's fairly cheap, I would be looking at Gumtree or eBay. I know there's been quite a few horror stories with scams and stuff, so obviously you have to be careful and use your common sense. If there's an offer that's too good to be true, or something seems a little bit dodgy about the person, then of course exercise caution. But you know, if you're used to using those sites for buying and selling stuff already, then you've probably seen all that stuff before. Anything, whether like, you know, you transfer me a bit of money to release some funds and then I'll transfer you like the rest of it, obviously it's rubbish, just don't bother. But you can find good legit buyers through there. Gumtree, I didn't really get anybody contact me from Gumtree, so I think eBay is probably the best place to sell. It had quite a few views, like over 100 views, but none of them converted into contacting me or coming to look at the bike. The thing with Gumtree though is sometimes people aren't very patient with eBay, and they just feel like they can buy something immediately on Gumtree if they go see it and it's nearby. So it's worth a punt. And also, you're going to be taking pictures for eBay, you're going to be writing a description, so you can basically copy and paste it onto Gumtree, and the basic listing is free, so you may as well give it a go. But realistically, I think eBay is the place. The only caveat to that is that obviously on eBay you've got quite significant fees. I think it was only a tenner to list my bike, but if you do through an auction or a buy it now or whatever, you might end up paying fees. You know, that said, I think this is against the eBay terms if you're doing a bike now or a sale of that nature, that if someone comes to look at it and then they offer you cash and then you cancel the auction, obviously you won't pay any fees, but it's against their terms of service. So if they find out about it, then you might get your account banned or something, but obviously that can happen. People will contact you to look at the bike. So that seems maybe to be the easiest way to sell a bike through eBay. Third tip is make sure you use good photos. Like, they're going to make a huge difference. And I'm not the best photographer in the world, but there's some fairly basic rules for getting good photos that you can follow. I mean, the most obvious one, doesn't matter what kind of photo you're taking, is lighting. Like, if you're taking pictures of your friends and family sitting by a window, and you're going to get good light, and it's going to be the same with the motorbike. Don't take them at night because the pictures are going to be rubbish. Don't take them in your garage unless you've got really good lighting or like natural light in there. Get your bike outside on a decent day. Overcast gives quite even lighting, so a day like today would be quite good. Secondly, you know, think about like what's around the bike and the background, like generally a simple against the wall or something like that. So it might be worth just wheeling your bike out and then down the road somewhere where there's like a plain wall and decent light. And then most people's camera phones are pretty awesome nowadays. I'd say an iPhone, any of the recent ones that I've had, the photos for that sort of thing easily good enough. But if you do have a proper camera and you know how to use it, then it's worth the effort getting it out, because it's going to make all the difference. And then just think about what shots you're going to take. Like, if I was buying a bike, I'd like to see wide shots, I'd like to see some close-ups so I can see how clean it is. I'd like to see it from the front, I'd like to see both sides. So just take a variety of pictures, get yourself into that photographer mindset. Kneel down, get low, get some close-ups of the engine and anywhere that, you know, it might get scraped. I mean, if a bike's been dropped, you'll probably see scrapes on the levers, scrapes on the bar ends. If there's crash bungs or engine casing, that might get scraped. Obviously the panels along the back of the seat. So get some shots of those so you can show it hasn't been dropped. But if you do have damage on the bike, get some good pictures. Like, that's one really big tip that I've got, and I guess that's my fourth one, is that the more honest you can be in your listing, although you might feel like you're going to get less money and you feel like you might put people off buying it, I think that's realistically actually going to be the opposite of what happens. So if there's damage on the bike, like my ER6, it had some scrapes down the seat panel at the back, and I took photos of it and I mentioned it in the listing. You know, there was a dent in the tank as well where the handlebar hit it when it got shoved over a year or so ago. Mention it because if somebody wants to come and see the bike despite the little bits of damage which they've already seen photos of, then there's a good chance they're going to buy it, isn't there? And also it means you're not going to get people showing up, you know, going out their way to come around and have a look at it. They might travel quite far as well, and then when they get there they're like, well, there's a dinge there, that puts me off a little bit, there's a scrape there, that doesn't look too good. But also if they think, well, he didn't mention this scrape on the bike, or he didn't mention this little cosmetic thing, what else is there that you haven't mentioned? And I think that'll probably put them on the defensive or put them in a bad mindset about getting the bike. So although it seems counterintuitive, I am quite thorough when listing any kind of damage and that sort of thing. It just gives them so much more ammo to knock you down on price as well. And so that brings me on to my last point, number 5. Be realistic about your price and expect to get knocked down a bit. So obviously you'll have some idea of how much you want to get for the bike, but you can always look at similar bikes with similar mileage, similar condition on eBay and Gumtree and MCN and Auto Trader, and there's even some websites out there that will roughly value what your bike's worth. I think actually on most MCN reviews there's a little bit that tells you what you should expect to pay for a bike new and what you should expect to pay used. I don't know how up to date they keep those, but it'll give you a ballpark anyway. But yeah, looking at other listings is probably your best bet. Oh, come on mate, let us through. Cheers. But generally, if you want to get rid of it quickly, then you know, it's always tempting to list it for a little bit more than you were hoping, or quite a bit more than you were hoping, and see if you get an offer. But if you want to get rid of it in a couple of days or so, then you're probably going to have to price it more realistically, around what you would probably pay for it yourself, or what you would you know, actually hope to get for it. Of course though, expect to get knocked down 100 quid or so probably, even if you've been very thorough about listing the bike and its condition and taking photos. I think that's just par for the course on something like Gumtree or eBay. I love filtering down here, it's easy. And I feel so smug. Cheers. Might go over here. Opens up to the bus lane down here. Anyway, just to recap, don't part exit because they'll rinse you. Try eBay because I think it's got the biggest audience. There's probably the most people looking to buy on there. Take really good photos. Be reasonable about listing damage and stuff, because ultimately it's going to be quicker, because you're not getting 20 people coming and looking at it and then deciding they don't want it because you've been dishonest. And lastly, you know, think about your price as well. Like, expect to get knocked down a little bit, so price accordingly, but don't put some pie in the sky figure in the hope that you're going to get like double what you paid for it or whatever. So that's my tips. I'm sure you've all got your own, so please let me know in the comments. I'll try and pin the best comments. Like, we get so many good comments on the videos with ideas and little things that people have been doing for years. So, you know, please do stick them down there, and I'll pin any that that I think are really useful to other people watching the video. If you've got any questions as well, stick them in the comments below, and if you're new, you want to see more videos like this, then click subscribe.